Welcome to the final episode of Series 85, everyone. This month we had Julian Kay joining us to talk about the mutant animal retro clone RPG called Mutants in the Now. In today's episode, we discuss the character creation process, including our fanfic. But before we get to that, we do have some calls to action coming up after the show. Here's what to expect. Join us here where we will have info about our next stream date on the One Shot Twitch channel, as well as information on our Patreon and how to leave a review for the show, as well as our patron thank yous. With all of that out of the way, enjoy the show, everyone.
Welcome back to our discussion episodes. Last time we finished our session 0 for our Mutants in the Now characters. This episode we are going to discuss that character creation process. We are excited to welcome back Julian Kay, creator of Mutants in the Now. Do you want to reintroduce yourself again for our audience? Tell them where they can find you and all that kind of stuff. And please tell us about the character you made in our previous episodes.
Yeah, I'm Julian Kay. I've been an indie tabletop RPG creator and freelancer for about the past 5 years. My chief output right now is for Mutants in the Now, which is a modern mutant animal adventure game. And you can usually find me as either Julian K or Arbco, that's AR letter B CO, or at places like Blue Sky or on Discord if you happen to share a server. And you can also find the Mutants in the Now and other work of mine at places like Itch and Drive-Thru-RPG, most easily linked through my website at j-k.games. And you can also find Julian K. Find my Patreon, where I do a lot of preview stuff for Mutants in the Now and behind-the-scenes stuff about design. And that's most of it. I could go on and on, but that should be the...
That'll get you started.
That'll get you started, yeah. And we're discussing the characters we created for Mutants in the Now. Mine was Rocky Rococo, who is a mutant crocodile. He was created by a mysterious interdimensional group who are attempting to take human animals and preserve them for the greater universal preservation, or perhaps for some other purpose. It's hard to say. They are kind of shady. And he was most likely mutated by accident involving them. He works for them basically as a mascot, going and doing a lot of exhibition matches for things like mixed martial arts and the like, and promoting what they're doing, at least the public side of what they're doing. He's kind of this big, tough, about like 8-9 foot tall brawler of a crocodile, but he does also have interest in their work. So he has like some knowledge, awareness of things like biology and genetics and medicine, at least when he isn't showing off for an exhibition with his cool skateboard or the cool oversized skateboard.
Yeah.
And that's most of it. He has some contacts in the organization, like Michael Goldberg, who goes around putting out little drones that seek out endangered animals to find them and, preserve a specimen, or Leia White, who probably is a doctor who sees whose injuries after matches, that sort of thing.
All right.
That's most of them. Oh, I would be remiss not to include the pet Egyptian plover he has, which I should really come up with a full name for. Let's call her Nancy.
Nancy. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I like to think of like Nancy as like probably his agent or something. Like I just picture her like handling all of his like secretarial and like business needs. I don't know why. It's just like Nancy seems like she's very organized.
Yeah. Maybe we could get this Egyptian plover mutated. I need to write up stats for Egyptian plovers is what I got to do.
That's
Online.
So what we're known for on this show is giving more people stuff on their to-do lists. We're like, what if you did this? And people are like, dang it.
For those who don't immediately recognize an Egyptian plover, they are the birds that clean crocodiles in both Egypt and America. So.
Oh, amazing. I love that.
Ryan, please tell us about your character.
Yeah, so I made Tinks, short for Tinkerbell. She is a lioness at an abandoned zoo that got mutated with a variety of other zoological creatures, including a red kangaroo, a lowland gorilla, a spotted hyena, and a common chimpanzee. So a motley crew of zoo just survivors, I guess. I don't know. We've just been kind of hanging out here and starting the garden and hunting in the fields and all that sort of fun stuff. And meanwhile, we found a old roll top, the old TV systems that they would roll into classrooms and stuff.
Yeah.
Back in the day. With a VHS instruction tape in there for learning how to do martial arts. So I learned Kyokushin through a VHS instructional manual of all things. And this 9'2", 272-pound lioness is just built to leap and claw and attack things with things like it's her telekinetic boost, her night sight. She likes to prowl. She has all sorts of additional tactics and whatnot to assist the team as a whole as we fight together. So she is a pack hunter and effectively the mama bear of the group. I think the biggest thing skill-wise for her is she's like huge into sociology and psychology and learning how people and mutant animals work and whatnot on a psychological level. So she's kind of the homebody and caretaker of the crew. I think that's everything. Oh, and she also has a friend named Avery Lee, who is also a sociologist, who moonlights as a reporter and a roboticist. And I also can't forget Tink's favorite casual companion, a white rat named Bootsy. Yeah. And I also have a flexible whip as my weapon because, a lion with a whip is just poetic. All right, Amelia, tell us about your character.
Sure. My character, Marigold Johnson, incredibly terrifying, huge creature. And by huge, I mean weighs a whopping 9.1 pounds. And she is a rabbit.
Just a baby.
Yeah. So for my background, as we rolled across the table, like kept having to it was like, then roll on this table, then roll on this table. Ultimately raised by mutants, but it started out in like the experimentation category. And then, we moved around several times. So yeah, I'm a New Zealand rabbit, very small. Most of my like fighting style and animal traits and that kind of thing center around running away and getting as far away from the problem as possible. I do have enhanced scent, I have night sight, burrow, but I also run really, really fast. I can jump pretty high. I can play dead. But I do have teeth that are mostly for gnawing. And I like to eat vegetables. My skills center around escaping, hiding, snooping, camouflage.
I sense a
vigilance.
theme.
Yeah, really big on running away. However, I do also have a number of skills involved in solving crimes, like questioning, vigilance, deduction, snooping, impersonation. So, you know, I like to hide away, not be seen, but that doesn't mean that I can't see what's going on with you. I think it's really, really what it comes down to. I did take a spy skill package. I do have one contact named Zoe White, who's an intelligence agent. But yeah, I didn't take any weapons. I'm really big on running away before there's a problem. But, you know, if you don't stay around for things to become a problem, do you really need to find solutions?
That's what we're here for, is to solve the problems that come up that you run away from.
Right. I also suspect that like 9 times out of 10, y'all are the problem. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
I have no idea what you mean.
I mean, I can very much see, you know, our lioness being like, no, we can all get along. And then we have our crocodile that, you know, is just like doing MMA or something. You know, I do know first aid. I would like to point that out. I do know first aid.
There you go.
And botany, but I also like to think that the botany is mostly for me to be able to find food.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Real big on running away. I think it's just the key takeaway from Marigold.
This group is so fun. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, let's go ahead and dive right into a segment that we are calling D20 for your thoughts.
D20 for your thoughts?
So in this segment, we talk to our guests about their thoughts on the character creation process in this game, in other games, all that kind of stuff. But first, we're going to start with the most cliche question that you've probably answered hundreds of times on any RPG podcast you've ever been on. How'd you first get into RPGs?
Well, I largely got into them, strangely enough, through a game called Car Wars back in the 80s, which is much more of a design your car and fight it out. But it has kind of light role play elements, mainly just because it's at that point in the 80s, there wasn't that hard division between what is a role-playing game and what is a miniatures game or what have you. For example, you have like early Warhammer Fantasy Miniatures has a lot of like role-play scenarios because their intent is like, yeah, you can have battles, but you can also just try and play D&D where you die in one hit. And so I got into that, and it was from there, weirdly, that I made connections with friends who were also interested in it back in the 5th grade. And they knew about D&D, and that's how I heard about Dungeons and Dragons. And I was going to be all set to get my own copies of the AD&D books when 60 Minutes aired a cautionary story about how people were being driven to madness by Dungeons and Dragons and going into
all true, I heard.
Sewer. Yeah, going into steam tunnels or what have you.
Yeah. Did great things for our community.
Yeah.
Nothing but growth from there.
And so I was not allowed to get Dungeons and Dragons, but that's where the twist comes in. When I couldn't get my normal X-Men comic books, I was allowed to buy a comic book, and so I bought an early issue of the Archie Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And from there, and shopping at the comic, role-playing game store, I saw that there was a role-playing game, which I got my mom to allow me to buy because you could flip to the center and see the comic book section and kind of get it in under the radar. And that's pretty much where I started. And it took me, so I got into a variety of games because that was back in the days that we're just trying to find whatever we could, and we didn't quite understand fully what the process of running a role-playing game is or anything like that. But we would find stuff like Traveler or Fantasy Wargaming, the highest level of all, that particular infamous old game. And we would just goof around a lot with it. And it wasn't until I moved to Madison, Wisconsin and started playing with college kids that I really started maturing and getting a good idea of where I, getting serious into role playing. So by the time I moved back to Ohio, I was ready to start running games seriously and all that. I've always been into kind of like hacking games and doing my own things with them because that was kind of weirdly it comes from Car Wars where you're building your own cars and whatnot. And so I was
Sure.
always of a mindset to like add my own things to games. But it wasn't until like around I got little bits and pieces into professional games, like the old Bubblegum Crisis anime role-playing game. Mentions a web page I had up for my campaign I was running with GURPS back in college.
Oh, good old GURPS.
I got like a bunch some spells into White Wolf Quarterly, that kind of thing. But I was doing a lot of fan work for a company called Level 99 Games in their kind of anime fantasy world of indies. And when they came around where they wanted to do a big like lore book and kind of codify a lot of the stuff they had, the head of the company basically said, "You're basically the only person other than me that can do this." And so I got hired on for Level 99 Games for about a year working on that and getting it out. And unfortunately, they dropped a bunch of folks off around COVID. And I was like, oh, I don't want to go back to doing IT because that was a tremendously stressful job. That was giving me a variety of stressful illnesses. And so I used COVID and that period to, to learn stuff like layout and start putting out my own little games. And by the time eventually I saw somebody I was going to do something for the Zine Quest promotion on Kickstarter. And I knew I wanted to do something. And there was a Twitter post. It's like, somebody should really bring back Teenage Ninja Turtles. All you'd have to do is simplify it. And I was like, I can do that.
Famous last words.
Yep, pretty much, because all you would have to do is simplify it, but I don't want to do that. It turns out at the end of the day, because you would end up with a very bland play, very interesting character creation, and very bland actual game. With all due respect to the 1985 design, there weren't a lot of games in that.
No due respect to that game. Zero respect.
Amelia's still getting over the trauma of when we covered.
I'll never be over that. It is a scar. Oh.
And yet still fun.
When did I know we talked about it probably in our first episode, but like when did the full book for Mutants in the Now release?
It would have been, I think, like early 2021.
Okay. I was gonna say that checks out because I have it. So
preview versions were bouncing around 2020, but
okay. Yeah. Awesome. I think that I got it as an Ennies submission.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
That's why I have it. So, I was going to say it was 21 or 22 somewhere. Like it lined up with the COVID time pretty well.
Absolutely.
And so, I got together a Kickstarter for Mutants in the Now, and that was successful enough. And then I decided to take everything I had wanted to do that didn't have the room or time and did Mutants in the Next, which was the first expansion. That made about 10 times as much on Kickstarter. So
nice.
I found my road ahead there.
Absolutely. So what sort of process or mechanic do you love to see in a character creation system? Like what's your favorite thing to see in a character creation system?
It's hard to say because I'm not inclined towards one way. But I like seeing stuff that makes me go, oh, I didn't think of that, but that's real cool. And I want to play that. Or maybe you have a number of tables to put something together. I think if I took a lesson home from Palladium's output in looking at it and doing it now is that specificity matters. There was a tendency over certainly the time that I played role-playing games to kind of increasingly generify character traits and character elements. And that is really cool if you have an idea. But if you don't have an idea walking in, it can be kind of like, it can be kind of tricky. And so having those things you can grab onto and those things that inspire you, I think was the thing I took home first, which is why there's a lot of specificity in Mutants in the Now, as opposed to my previous games, which would be like, choose these 3 traits and give it a name and figure out everything yourself.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thought, because I think overall in role-playing games, as things have sort of, like broadly, there's been kind of a skew to more rules light sort of things that are picking like a lot of those like broader categories that you then sort of define in play. That that like leave a lot of room for interpretation, and then you go to something like Mutants in the Now, where it is you are like drilling down more and more and more as you go.
Yeah.
To a point where it's like, I am this kind of rabbit. I was raised this way. I have these, and it is a very different style from like the way things have been trending, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, you have a variety of things, like something like Apocalypse World. It's fairly generic in who you're creating, but you are given a very strong thematic overview, for example, for what character you're making. And I think one thing, like I said, like when I was looking at like the older Palladium games, like you have some fairly generic classes that aren't that inspiring, like City Rat, where you're a street criminal. But you also have stuff like Glitter Boy, which points to like you have this suit of armor, which goes back to this tradition, that goes back to like these kind of like cultural elements are around it. It's not like the most thought out example of that, but it's really good as far as like going, this is the role my character plays in this world, Yeah. And you don't have, and which is why I was inspired to do things like doing specific species, which is, I'll always say, is just, it's overdoing it. I will fully admit that. But it also, like, saying that I am a New Zealand white rabbit feels distinct from just saying I am a small lagomorph,
Right. Because you could have had just, you're a rabbit category, and then anybody who's a rabbit gets to say, well, I'm this type of rabbit, but all the stats stay the same and all that sort of stuff. But having all the distinction really does add a bit of charm to that character, which is really neat. Yeah, most mutant animal games that have inspired by it have gone for that kind of generality, and I don't blame them, because it's a lot of work to do it otherwise. But
yeah,
that's why in like Mutants from the Archives, which is the newest book that I'm about to put out the preview draft for the Kickstarter backers, has like 60 forms of dog and randomized mixed breeds with their own unique abilities, because I didn't want them to just be watered down, purebreds. So
yeah. Well, I think about something like dog, where you're like, okay, that's a very broad category. Like a beagle and a golden retriever are not the same.
No,
like, like I look around, like I have a mini golden doodle, and then in my apartment complex, there's also a Great Dane that, like my golden doodle is like, I can take that dog. And I'm like, no, you can't. But, but like, those are two very different things. Like, we're not on the same plane at all. I also like that you're like, you know what, I've also specified a long-term career for myself, because there are many animals. You're like, this is like my long-term, you're like, I've got a long-term business plan, and it's write all the animals.
Yeah, that will never happen, of course. That's an impossible task. But I still get like people like out of the gate, you asking for an animal and kind of going, yeah, that's not in there yet. Poison dart frogs aren't in there yet. And
we sat down and I was like, there better be a flamingo in this book. And you're like, it's on the list.
Yeah. I think I do believe I have it statted behind the scenes for a future book, but
yeah. And you got all the prehistoric animals, and
which I've been previewing some of that kind of stuff on my Patreon, doing some dinosaurs, doing some extinct animals. So
yeah. See, I think that was just job security is what that was. Like, specificity is great in games, but also specificity is job security. Like, that's a business plan.
It's worked out for Palladium Books. It was like, generalities about Australia. We have to drill down and tell you the 20 different classes that only exist in Australia.
14 different types of juicers. And
look, I've been reading all of my NE stuff, and I just read Cthulhu Ireland. So, like, look, there's a market for it.
Absolutely.
Anyway,
I've been wanting to do mutants around the world is on my short list. And wanting to get actual, different writers other than myself who have good
nice
insights into different areas of the world or different. cultures. So
it'd be cool to
I
do
would
like
not.
mythical ones too. Like, it's like we need like some unicorns and some chupacabras and some.
I
Oh,
have
yeah.
actually teased that. Mutants in the Next had a few. I actually had unicorn and chupacabra in there. And I'm teasing a few more in Mutants from the Archives, which has the Flicker Hund, which is a totally uncopyrighted teleporting dog.
Mm-hmm.
And things like when I was doing my research, I would find like basically fake breeds of cat that don't actually exist, and some of them ended up in there. I think my favorite is probably the Pittsburgh refrigerator cat, which was supposedly bred to hunt pests inside of large refrigerator units.
Ooh,
And
right.
it's the kind of thing that gets like spread as a tall tale and then ends up all the way with a British reporter going, well, they said it was true in America, so it must exist.
Must exist. The New York pizza rat, probably.
Yeah.
Good expansion material there.
You throw some hodags in there. That's probably a real thing, right?
The Mexican hairless cat, which there are a lot of stories of, but does not actually exist.
Right. Yeah. See, the possibilities are endless.
So, but yeah, and it's also just a fascinating. It's always interesting to go into various animal species and discover things that are interesting about them that I never. That normally you would kind of look over and say small bird, and then look into like the difference between like cardinals and blue jays and robins and all that, and how they are very distinct in many ways.
I always find it fascinating because it's like there will be birds that I'm like, oh, those are like a clearly related species. And they're like, no, actually, that is like closer related to a cat. And then that one is like much more like a fox. And you're like, but they're birds. I don't understand. And they're like, no, they're not even close at all.
Yeah.
You're like, but I thought they were.
No, they all have a very, very similar strategy, flying away from trouble. But it's a very successful strategy. So they're very similar in many ways. But
yeah.
I try not to run on assumptions a lot and try and challenge.
Yeah. One thing that we like to talk about is the character sheets in a game, because it is really kind of the first interaction that a lot of people have with the game and the mechanics. And, especially as players, a lot of times you're not sitting down and reading through the whole book, right? The character sheet's the first thing that you see. So I'm wondering for you, like, what kind of things did you want to see in a character sheet? What things were really important when you were designing that? All that kind of stuff. Especially when you come to a game like this that does have a lot of specificity. It has a lot of stats and skills and things like that.
Yeah, the Mutant Now ones were designed largely for utility. Making sure you have all the numbers you need on hand and all the mechanics you need on hand. Because it is older, closer to something like a D20 game where you have a number of maneuvers and a variety of attribute-based, percentages and bonuses. And so originally my thought was, and aesthetically, I originally wanted it to be kind of almost like I was trying to model it after old FBI write-ups of wanted people, but that I don't think I quite succeeded that, unfortunately. So it's mainly looks very, very practical more than anything else. And it's something I'd like to revisit in the near future and create something that's a little more evocative, because evocative sheets with like little touches of, good layout and style can also do a lot to kind of act as a little secondary inspiration. So I've got some ideas along those lines, and I want to revisit it after Archives to try and create something I feel is more aesthetically strong. But I really did do a lot of work in terms of developing things like the fight sheets, which sum up a lot of the combat mechanics so you don't have to flip through. And that came out of playtesting. Things like the mutation sheets, which include a lot of the information and hopefully simplify things like, doing all the addition and whatnot as we're going through that particular process. So a lot of it right now has just been a focus on usability, and hopefully in the future I'll have a bit something that matches closer to the books themselves with their kind of dirty retro aesthetic.
Oh yeah. The retro aesthetic definitely is showcased on these, and I got more of a like lab science sort of document. from it.
Yes.
When I was filling it out. Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It reminded me of like lab notebooks and stuff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which I was just talking with my kids about this morning, and apparently they don't use anymore.
Yeah.
But no, I think it's very interesting, and it's always difficult when you're talking about a kind of a crunchy system that has a lot of skills and a lot of things. And I appreciate that it was not the Palladium sheet that's just like, here's a bunch of lines. And I'm like, I could have used notebook paper and it would have had the same usability as this sheet. You know, I like that there are, you know, all of these like check boxes when you get to the skills, you know, to mark off like, this is a package skill, this is a hobby skill, this is, you know, like that kind of stuff, so that I'm not trying to like note that in different colors in the margins of my sheet where it doesn't, you know, I thought I did appreciate the fact that like when it came down to like to write all of the things that you did, I know like our listeners will be tired of me saying like, it was clear to me where I was supposed to put that information on the sheet, because you'd be surprised at how often that doesn't happen, but especially when you get to a crunchier game that has a lot of stuff that I need to make notes on, that all of it was right on the sheet. That, you know, like when it gets to the size information, there's a spot not just for the size rating, but for the weight and the height and the lift and the move and all of that kind of stuff. Because I think sometimes some of that gets left off in the interest of fitting everything or, you know, like aesthetics or something like that. But when you're playing, it's like I have to have that notated in the margin then somewhere that like, you know, so I appreciate that while there is a lot to keep track of on this sheet, like you did make a point to put spots for all of those things.
Yeah. Well, one thing that was a real push was try and keep it to 2 pages, make it one double-sided sheet. If I were to make it more aesthetic, it might be more of a aesthetic sheet. It would probably balloon to like 4 pages, and so it's something I have to consider going forward. And you know, it could have more than one sheet type as time goes on, depending on what people want. One thing I really like, though it's always a little bit more of a challenge, is folks that can figure out different paper sizes and paper types for sheets, whether or not it's like almost like a gatefold or you know, or just doing like a legal size sheet, for example. You can do a lot of stuff within that space without necessarily requiring somebody in that's while softening the difficulty of having a sheet that you flip over or flip between.
Oh yeah.
Right.
So
I've seen like trifolds and like booklet style sheets where it's like printed in the same ratio but on multiple pages that you kind of put together in a little pamphlet, so to speak. I've worked with the pamphlet setup for like I did Faith and Sales, which was my like a 2-page piracy game, and that was I was able to get it down to, I think it's larger than a normal piece of paper. The one I finally printed out, I think it's supposed to be illegal, but it lets you do interesting things and lets you have an interesting kind of physical object. And
it is a really delicate balance between like, I want you to have all of the information you need, but I also need it to be big enough to be useful to you. Cause like, it doesn't help to have that information in there if it's too small for you to even write it in the box. You know, like if you have to make your print so small that you can't read it, then why is it on the sheet? You know?
So I think one thing to consider in going forward with sheets is just like different, you know, size and form factors can be useful. Because the standard is, of course, just 8.5 by 11, double-sided, add pages if necessary. And it might be interesting to look into, seeing if there's a way to make it more. But balance the engagement and utilitarianism.
Yeah. I think it's a good point, though, that, like, you know, there is the potential to have, like, different kinds of sheets available for people, because I think there are some people that are like, I just want the basic information in front of me. And then there are, you know, people like me that I'm like, I want to write all of those little details so that I don't ever have to go back into the book and, you know, and so I do think, like, I know it's work, but I would love to see some games offer, like, different kinds of character sheets for different types of players, too, just because some people want different, you know. What you want out of your character sheet can vary from person to person too. So it's always interesting to, you know, especially when you get like fan-made character sheets and stuff, those are always really fun for me to look over and be like, what was it that you wanted in this sheet too?
Apocalypse World lets you fold into a pamphlet, for example. it's not a proper pamphlet, but it's a pamphlet. And the and stuff like CBR plus PNK has just
Oh my gosh.
really striking, absolutely striking
those are
stuff with
beautiful.
those, like character playbooks. So,
Oh gosh,
yeah.
Brian, I'll have to show you them at some point.
Yeah, if you
they
haven't seen
are
them,
like
it's worth looking up.
Yeah, I've been very curious.
When
about
we're
that
done
game.
recording, I'll go grab them off my shelf. But they're like laminated, like you can write on them in like dry erase, and they're like the full like folded character pamphlets that has all your information. Yeah.
Definitely.
Denny's judges, we always, because it's I think it's supposed to be cyberpunk, but it's like missing all the vowels, so we always called it caberpink, which is what I always think of every time I read it. I'm like, it's caberpink. But yeah, I'll just show you that one. That one's, I think we nominated it for layout and design.
Yeah, it's definitely a high watermark for layout last year. So.
Yeah, yeah, I'll show it to you, Ryan. It's gorgeous.
Awesome.
But yeah, I will say, like, it's a lot of information to fill on a sheet, and you get to a point where it's like you only have so many layout options when you have to like fill every, it's like there's a lot of information to keep track of.
Absolutely.
And there's definitely things I would simplify if I go for a second time around, but for now, it's what I got, and it's what I got to work for. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that's like the more you play it, the more you use it, the more you watch other people use it, the more you're like, okay, I realized that like I thought we were going to be going to this particular thing a lot, and it turns out we're not. Or which is again the importance of playtesting. But you can't playtest a thing for 10 years.
No.
So after a while, you're like, wait a minute, people are doing different things with my stuff than I thought that they would, and so I think it's always very valid for especially for designers and stuff to be like, you know what, I've realized that maybe I would do it different now. That's cool too.
That's always a challenge for games. Most traditional games that have an extensive advancement system for characters.
Yeah.
I promise you the D&D folks are not playtesting 17th level characters. They're just not.
No.
So you can end up with like games like the original Legend of the Five Rings that once you get to like third level or so, the game really starts to come off the tracks because they didn't really play test the math beyond a certain point, unfortunately.
Yeah, you get to a point where you have to like remake your character sheet because you've erased so many things and changed the numbers in your rings so many times that you've erased right through the little ring on the page. And I wouldn't know that because I didn't play a Shigenja all the way up to like rank 7. What are you talking about? The game falls apart after a while. You're like, I've taken all of the spells. What do you mean? There are no more left.
Well, also in particular, like the rolling chief math starts to fall down. You're making like regularly making rolls that are like a result of 60 when 20 to 30 is high. And so it's like, what do you even do with that as a game master?
Right. I'm going to make 7 raises now. I love Legend of the Five Rings is my favorite game. 4th edition is garbage, and it has my heart.
Amelia's Palladium.
That is my Palladium. Yes. Legend of the Five Rings is my...
I was a huge Legend of the Five Rings GM for a long while. I have misgivings with it these days, but overall, for sure. I have a deep amount of nostalgia for both the card game and role-play game.
Yeah. Yeah. A friend and I were making a lore podcast for a little while. That was a mess. We had a great time. Look, I read the Scorpion Clan novel. Okay. There's some good stuff in there. Yeah.
I did. Yes. I used part of what kind of started building up to this, weirdly enough, is on Something Awful. I was a regular of the traditional games forum. And one thing we had was a thread called Fatal and Friends that was basically, in theory, like doing long form reviews and mocking different RPGs. And often it turned to celebrating different RPGs because a lot of people just, want to talk, this is why this is so cool. So there's a lot of positivity in there. But I started my basically posting history there doing riffs and basically doing a lot of cheeky comedy and information on riff. And that eventually led to me doing a book with Aaron Clooney, who translated Maid and a variety of other Japanese RPGs. They're doing a book called Back to the Rifter, which you can find on Drive to RPG. That is a kind of both like, this is why this is so cool, and this is all the stuff that ways it fails and falls down, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, I'm a big believer in the fact that like the more you love something, the more obvious it becomes, like the places that it fails,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Because it's like
Mhm.
you've read it so many times that you're like aware of all of the places that it could be better and it just isn't.
Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily, you know, make you hate it or anything. It's just because I love it so much, I see all the places where it could be better,
Yeah.
Mhm.
you know?
And that's I did a review of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles during that time. That was, it's like both positive and negative, like the character creation is
Mhm.
real cool. There's a lot of cool ideas. Eric Wujic is a fantastic descriptive writer. But at the same time, like the combat section is just a mess of terms,
Mhm.
a lot of terms that boil down to take your biggest weapon and swing it at the enemy and see if you hit.
Yeah.
Unless you really drill down and go, I'm going to do a simultaneous attack every time and just try and out damage my enemy as fast as I can, or do some weird strategy. But there aren't a lot of those in that game.
Nope.
So beyond, I dump my fully automatic weapon and win all the fights.
Mhm.
Murder.
Yeah.
That was one thing I
win.
definitely tried to tone down in Mutants of the Now is guns are effective, but they're unreliable and kind of boring.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't think any of us took a gun.
No.
No.
Although cute bunny with gun does, I'm still
Yeah.
thinking about it, but
there's
maybe later.
a character over at Role-Playing Public Radio with Cindy the Raccoon that was based off of the illustration from Cinnabar of a raccoon with a rocket launcher.
Amazing.
Yeah.
But that's one thing you see a lot in the old TMNT rule books. There's a lot of like Badger with a submachine gun. You get a lot of pictures of anthropomorphic gun.
Mhm.
And you don't see a lot of that in my art. Like on the cover of Mutants of the Now, you have the muskox with I think it's called a punt gun, but it was one of those guns that was made semi-illegal because it's basically like a shotgun that you cannot like hand fire. You just like mount it on a boat and kill all the ducks with it.
Oh.
That was the intent. And so this idea of this ridiculous oversized weapon for us and wilderness mutant to carry around was kind of neat. But at the same time, I wanted to focus beyond martial arts and on all the cool things you can do with classical weapons and all that.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate games where it's like there aren't, because I think this is a problem that we came up with several times when we covered Palladium games, is that there really are right answers in character creation in those games, that it's like, if you don't take this, you're going to suffer later.
Yeah.
And so I do appreciate that, like, as we went through this, like, I guess in this kind of, maybe Ryan, we should just ask the next question and then I can talk about this.
Well, the one thing I'll say about that is the usual Palladium answer put forth in their books is that, well, anybody can do anything with any character. It's a challenge and you should be creative. It'll spark you to be creative. But at the same time, but the
we've
issue
made
with
certain things so powerful that...
But at the same time, you can run into the struggle where it's like you have no point. You either have to at that point, you're finding ways to intrigue the GM.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have any innate mechanical power as a character. And a lot of characters are going to steal your spotlight mechanically in things like combat. And so it's basically putting more pressure and requiring more effort from you to find ways to make your character shine and get time in the spotlight, which is how I see balance. You get combat is a part of it and things like that, but mostly it's like, does your character have some point where they can do something cool or have their background highlighted or something that brings them into the spotlight so characters get different time and you don't have like one guy who just steps into fights and finishes them for everybody kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Exactly.
But it's not just fights.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of how the character creation went, how do we think the character creation for Mutants in the Now stacks up to other systems we've played or created characters for?
Yeah, so I think, like I was saying, that it feels like there aren't clear right answers where because we did Palladium games, that it's like you have all of these things and so much of your skills and your stats and like all of that kind of stuff is centered around combat.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, if I don't get these particular things and I don't get them in this particular way where they level up at the highest percentage,
Yeah.
if I don't take them from this particular place, I am then at a loss later on because I
Mhm.
didn't do those things. And the game doesn't support you doing a lot of other things outside of combat.
Oh, yeah. Like
You know?
everybody's a boxer and either an acrobat or a gymnast.
Right. Yeah. And you're backflipping in and out of rooms just to say that you used that skill so that you can up it by the percentage because you took
So you
it
can get the
for your
25 experience
occupation
points.
rather
Absolutely,
than
yeah.
your hobby or yeah.
Mhm.
So, I appreciate that this didn't have that. I do appreciate that we had like packages because I think that when we get down to that specificity and like the number of skills available, I tend to get overwhelmed. That's why I don't
Right.
like those kinds of games because they're like, pick 70 things. And I'm like, I picked the 4 at the time. I don't,
Mhm.
So I like having, skill packages where it's like, okay, I can gotta pick a theme and it's like, you get all of these. Great. I don't have to worry about it. Where it's here's a list of, 10 or 15 things, pick 8.
Yeah.
Great. I'm good with that. That I think to me is like the perfect amount of choice without being overwhelmed.
Yeah. It definitely feels like it has the spirit of like the Palladium character creation system where like for all the flaws that Palladium has, well, like when you get to the nitty-gritty details and all that sort of stuff, you can create some really cool, unique things in the Palladium. We're talking about that specificity, right?
Mhm.
You get very specific in a lot of the supplements in Palladium and whatnot. And especially the mutant animal supplements that they have. There's like all sorts of mutant animals. And like to be able to take the spirit of that specificity and configuration and complexity and boil it down into something that's a lot more easy
Doesn't
to
make
grok.
Amelia cry.
Yeah,
Is really
it's huge, right?
I think those were the words you were looking for. Boil it down to
Yeah.
something that doesn't make Amelia cry.
Right, because like I still got the same like feel of I'm creating a cool mutant animal with cool powers and cool abilities and stuff like that without all of the Palladium overhead.
Yeah. Well, and I do like to pick all of those skills. Like I like to be able to go through and pick all those things. It's one of the things that I loved in making my L5R characters too, is you're going through and picking, all of the various skills, because I think that in a lot of ways, those are the places where characters really come together. It's that and picking flaws are usually the things for me that do it, right?
Right.
But like as we're going down and I'm picking more and more skills, I'm getting a better and better idea of like who this character is. Like as I pick more and more things that are escape, hide, like run away, like I'm like, oh, okay, I know what I'm doing. And so I like having the option to pick all of those specific things, but in a way that doesn't feel just like a deluge of information.
Right.
And then like the worry too, like worry that I'm like missing something important. Because it's not just like, oh, there's too many options to pick it from. It's what if I don't get something that I do need later on? And that goes back to the like, there are, whether there are right or wrong choices too.
Yeah, the optimal builds and stuff like that mechanically.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's certainly a concern of mine going into something like this, is that kind of like D20 character theory crafting. And I think randomization helps a lot in undercutting that. Because there are probably best choices.
Yeah.
My goal is trying to make sure that the best choices are best choices for a situation, but not that each character hopefully has enough for a variety of unique abilities that they have something that they can do, whether it's in or out of combat, whether it's solving issues or looking into mysteries or social stuff or engaging in the contests, that they have something that they can do that's unique to them and can stand out, whether it's even just like, I'm the only person that has, infrasonic hearing, and what that can mean. So
I think that also comes from having a game that supports things outside of combat too, though, right? Like that goes back to that, like, I I can pick a wider variety of skills because it's okay for me to be good at things that aren't just punching people in the face, or, you know, like the only way to win the game is to have best gun, you know?
Yeah.
And so like, I appreciate that this is a game where like all of those other things are possibilities too, that like, you know, like the fighting things will come up, but you know, like being able to do investigation or, you know, having really good hearing and things like that are all things that like can come up and play. And some of that is GM stuff, which is, I think, you know, something that older games, you know, weren't as good at. That like, I think a lot of the pressure of making a game happen fell on the GM.
Yeah.
Because it was like, you know, your players you pick all of their combat things, and it was like up to the GM to like, anything that happened outside of that was not supported by the rules of the game. And so, you know, if you didn't pick the perfect combat skills, you know, it really was the GM's problem. And so I think, you know, some of that is just like design philosophy of like well-roundedness of games that I think we've come to accept a little bit more as role-playing games have, you know, kind of, you know, spread apart from wargaming and things like that, right? Like some of that is just the sort of social drift apart of those two things.
Yeah.
But I appreciate that, you know, I don't know. I just keep coming back to the, like, it didn't feel like there were wrong answers while I was doing this. And that was really important to me.
There's also just like the question of what you do that's mechanical versus what's implied. Like the aforementioned something like ultrasonic hearing. You know, I could give some mechanical bonus, but really it just comes down to that is a part of your character's world and increases their kind of like capability of what you can do descriptively or what you might have input on descriptively.
Yeah.
And certainly if I were to do a more robust GM section, that would definitely be something to bring up, is like the fact that you start with like, whether or not you start with a smartphone does matter. It's, there's no mechanical benefit for, you know, direct role benefit to having a smartphone, but it lets you do things. So a lot of things like that.
That did make me question. I was like, I had to go back and be like, do I have opposable thumbs? I picked a smartphone, but do I? Like, have I modified this smartphone to, you know?
Ironically, you might not need a full opposable thumbs. You might need it to hold on to it comfortably, but.
Yeah, I guess I did pick vocal for my speech type too. So, you know, I don't know, maybe I can use some voice to text options or something. I don't know. I was like, wait a minute, did I put all of these pieces together when I made this character? Yeah, I mean, I'm curious about like your experience with playing some of those like kind of Palladium games, because I guess really all I know about them is what I've learned from Ryan, because I played D20 Modern for a little while, but not, you know, anything quite that like skill heavy and things. And so like what I learned from him as we're making characters was like, he's like, you got to take this here because once you level up, you need the thing to level up at this rate, not this other rate, or, you know. So I'm curious about how that kind of impacted your design on some of this too.
You know, I think in my heart of hearts, I would like to have a system where each skill has like unique benefits that you can roll for, a la, you know, like D20 Fantasy Craft, which is a D20 game, was very good about that in telling you exactly what the impact of a skill roll would be. But it's just not something I had the design space for. And so I focused more on skills as a form of characterization. Obviously, they have impacts on what you might be able to discover or accomplish. But at the same time, one thing I avoided doing in the dramatic rules section was dictating skills. And you look throughout the book, I'll almost always say, make a dramatic roll. And the idea being that you go to the GM, go, I'm using the skill to do this, instead of GM going, use the skill. And most like, I would say 90% of the time, they're going to be doing this in some logical way. I'm going to be using sneak to get past this guard. I'm going to be using, you know, automotive to drive this car. But at the same time, I wanted to have it open to, well, I get past, I distract this distract this guard with my car, you know. I drive up and honk the horn, and then the other person sneaks past, and so I'm going to roll, you know, my car skill or what have you.
Yeah.
And
I'm a big fan of stuff like that, of like, okay, if you can explain to me how you use that skill to do this, like, go for it, I guess.
Yeah.
You know?
And so, yeah, I basically wanted as being more of a narrative thing that helps describe what you do and how you do it. And rather than necessarily being a big limiter on what you can do.
Right.
Yeah.
Obviously, some skills are going to be more logically suited to some than others, but at the same time, I wanted to encourage that kind of creativity. So,
yeah.
And that also gives me the advantage of just like adding skills whenever I want as a designer, and it doesn't matter too much.
That's true too. Yeah. That doesn't break the game to put another thing in there.
Yeah. Because I wanted to kind of that old school feel where you have this kind of variety of skills. But I also didn't want to have it be like a lot of old games where, like I hate to keep going back to Palladium, but it's the touchstone where
for sure.
all the skill system is roll to see if you pass or fail on the skill. The percentage you get it is largely arbitrary, and that's it. And there are a lot of penalties to reduce somebody's ability to do something into the molten core of the earth. But I wanted the ability for folks to do stuff to be stronger and more flexible. So, and there's a lot of like specific rules about doing, challenges against each other, doing how social interactions work or how mysteries work, and how all those are different applications as opposed to just roll to see if you pass, fail. And just weird, like elements. Like I decided to have basically your margin of success is your roll on a percentile, under the thought that if your skill's higher, you're more likely to get those higher percentiles anyway. So it's a little loose, but it avoids having to do math at the table. So there you go.
Yes. Yeah. Like A+. Love that.
Yeah.
Love that.
A lot of what you'll find like on that character sheet is that there's a fair amount of math and character creation, but once that's over, you generally don't have to do it. That it's all there in front of you, and that you're not having to deal with a lot of modifiers. And that was one thing I was really trying to avoid, was having like a lot of +1, -1 that you see in a lot of D20 games.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like I'm much more okay with math and character creation when it's like I'm not holding up the entire session trying to like count all of my modifiers and be like, okay, I have 6% over here. And then if I add this 12% that I get from this thing, but subtract, it's like that just like slows everything down for me. Whereas like in character creation, it's like when we're all doing the math at the same time, that's fine. I don't like where it's like somebody else is waiting for their turn and I'm like, hold on, I can't remember what 12 plus 18 is. Give me a minute to like, Yeah,
it could be informed by me playing like Savage Worlds about a year or two beforehand. And one of the things I foolishly did as a GM was having a combat involving vehicles as one of like the first combat events. And there are just so many modifiers due to those vehicles moving at, different rates and how big they are, and are they coming straight at you, or are you traveling alongside them? I really do like Savage Worlds quite a bit, but it is an older school game with a lot of fiddly bits if you're not careful.
Yeah, I think vehicle combat.
I think a lot of games, vehicle combat is
games.
Just.
It's so bad in a lot. Like Palladium is notorious for. I don't think anybody in existence, even the creators of Palladium, understand all the vehicle combat rules.
I don't think the vehicle combat rules in Palladium. I don't know if I'm saying it right. I
think it's Palladium. Ryan says Palladium, but I'm pretty sure it's Palladium.
But ultimately, there are a lot of rules with no context for them. There's no combat structure for vehicles. And you have things like they're really big on some of the early books on having what they called I'm blanking out on the chicken games, where in theory you're charging against each other and see who breaks off and things like that. But in what order do they occur? Who initiates them? Is just let your GM work it out. And that's the way a lot of that goes. Is just it's like I describe a lot of early role-playing games as like a set of notes that you can compile into what resembles the designer's intent. Like AD&D, in my mind, is very much like a golden example of that, whereas first edition is like a set of notes that Gary Gygax wrote down, and you can try and assemble it into a game that you can play.
Yeah.
But nobody's going to use all the notes, and nobody's going to be using all the rules, because there are just parts that you all have to decide that no, having the GM act as the impartial judge of your the way how well you have role played your class and alignment, and how that impacts your ability to handle advancement times and things like that nobody touches, Yeah. Where he's giving people like A's, B's, C's, V's based on, as a fighter, did you charge in and fight the enemy first, or did you hide back? If you hide back, you're not playing the fighter right. So,
did you give me anything to charge at? That sounds like it's on you.
So in Palladium, you'll have things like the injury rules for when you take certain amounts of damage, and they're optional. Should you use them? Doesn't tell you. How much damage does it take? Around this point, like 30 to 25%, and stuff like that, where it's just like, okay, that's a system, but it's not, it's kind of, there's a lot of parts where it's just kind of never brought back around into something that you can recognize as a game like you would recognize a board game, Yeah.
I feel like it has like a little too much of like an Italian grandmother vibe of like, I don't know, just like measure with your heart. Do what your soul tells you.
Yeah. Throw in a pinch.
Yeah, you'll know when it's enough. It's okay.
So, yeah, as one thing I was trying to do is try and find that fine line between having systems that aren't too tight, but having things like, if you want to toss somebody into these electrical cables, or pick up an improvised weapon, or do something I have not described in the rules. I try to have outs for that in the rules, but within an actual structure, as opposed to just being like, maybe you could add pepper to your dungeoneering experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and it's difficult, like, as a designer, to be like, I want to build enough scaffolding that this is useful to you without completely closing everything off so that you can't do anything outside of that.
Yeah.
But, enough of a structure that like, it's not just like freeform going to collapse as soon as you start doing anything.
Right.
And it is, it is a very difficult balance to walk. And again, that's, where things like playtesting really, really, really matter.
Yeah, I remember I was playing in a Heroes Unlimited game, and I rolled a natural genius. And the natural genius's whole thing is that you're a genius and you have all these skills. And I tried I'm playing with this GM I haven't played with before, and I'm like, I want to do this thing with a skill in combat, and there are no guidelines for that. I was like, well, don't. Basically.
Oh,
okay. So I can't all my characters stuff they're really good at, I can't actually put forth in a conflict. Okay.
Yeah, as we all know, that's the number one rule of improvising is don't.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
I remember whenever I would do like a playtest when I was younger, my goal was to find something that just flummoxed. Okay, I'm a dwarf on a motorcycle and trying to I want to jump off my motorcycle and hit him with my axe. They're like,
Yeah.
Now we got to pick up your speed and attach how many D6s per 10 miles per hour.
So a few times in life I've gotten, can you please do something else?
Yeah.
The instigator over there.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm assuming.
But I appreciate that as a game designer when somebody pulls something like that. And there are certainly a number of rules in Use Now that are because of that. Kind of stuff.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Character creation is like the first sort of interaction the players have. We talked about with the character sheets, it's sort of the first thing you see. But the actual process of character creation is your first interaction with the rules too. And so we like to ask people, like, how do you feel that character creation sets up expectations for what gameplay is going to be like? I know we touched a little bit on the fact that while character creation is math heavy, the game itself is not. But I'm curious, like, what other things you think that the character creation process can tell people about the game itself?
I think one of the things I kind of strived for to some extent was not weighing folks down during character creation with too much knowledge. And that may be a mixed blessing in some places. Like, for example, when you select weapons, The weapons are in the combat section. They aren't in the equipment section, or the full details are in the equipment section. Because I just didn't want people to look at the stats and go, okay, I'm choosing it based on these stats.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Classic
so
Palladium.
I had certainly have a section that's here are the very basic rules at the start of, character creation. Here are the dice you'll be rolling. Here are somehow like damage is calculated, that sort of thing. So
All
hopefully
games
people
should have a little 2-page quick start guide in the beginning of the book. This is
Yeah.
my hot take on game design is tell me the rules right away
So
in a quick way.
hopefully you're going in with at least enough awareness that you might not understand everything, but you'll understand the broad strokes.
Mhm.
And that was the intent, is for people to build based on what they think is cool, what they think the vibes are. I would not say I do a spectacular job of teaching the rules in the character creation, but it's a really heavy process to begin with. And so I really wanted to kind of separate it out to some extent. And then you can, figure things out once the character's done. Because it's certainly you can do a lot of interesting things in terms of mixing what would be regular play and putting together into a character creation. It would be interesting to see more games that do that.
Yeah.
It's always a tough challenge to try and divide between educating and just making the process smooth and enjoyable.
For sure. For sure. You don't want to overwhelm people and be like, you must learn all of the rules before you can even touch the game. Like, no.
Yeah,
you've lost me.
Sometimes I've done that as a player, but I do not expect everybody to do it. But yeah, it's and it's always kind of tricky because a lot of that kind of goes back to the old tradition of the GM being not only just the arbiter of the rules, but the interpreter of the rules. And
right.
Yeah.
One thing I try and emphasize in the game was just like the table decides, the group decides instead of the GM decides. Obviously, there are points where a game master has to be kind of either the breaking vote or has to make the decision on their own. But a lot of the way, say, like the old AD&D guide does not give any of the players any of the rules because they are not supposed to necessarily have to know or care about what the rules are. The game master is a referee, and they tell you what happens based on your actions.
Yeah.
And you definitely see some push of that kind of thing in like the old school Renaissance scene. But I see mechanics as a designer, I see mechanics as a means that players have of influencing the narrative. Obviously, the game master also does it with mechanics, but it is the one place that you have a definitive ability to say this happens. This one thing happens. If I hit, I hit, And so I see mechanics as valuable in that way of giving players a means of feeling that they can directly affect the story.
Yeah.
And take it into places that the game master might not have intended, might not have wanted, but it is a group, endeavor. So
Yep.
You got that. I wanted to at least have a slightly more egalitarian feeling, even if it's still a traditional role-playing game.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the game master can throw as many, can do whatever they want, in terms of throwing numbers around and what have you. So
for sure.
Absolutely.
For sure. And I think that like as a player, because like I'm an always player. I don't like running games. But like I don't sit down to play a game that like I can't influence. Like I don't. That's like otherwise I would play a video game that has a set story that has,
it's the whole railroading sort of debate, right?
Right. Yeah.
And then
I want my actions to matter. Otherwise, I would listen to you like tell me the story. Of what I mean,
back in like high school, I ended up playing a lot of Amber Diceless, which is another Eric Wujic game. And in that, the mechanics are entirely the GM decides. And so I can put all the points I want into strength, but does it matter?
Right.
In theory, if I have a fair GM who's able to interpret things in a I hate to keep using the word egalitarian, but a fair way. And Amber is a game that encourages GMs to do things unfairly. So, there's like at one point you can buy a thing called good stuff, which is how much people like you and how much luck you have.
Wow.
And in the GM advice, it also encourages, if you take bad stuff, you have bad luck and people don't like you. And in the examples of good and bad stuff, it also just encourages the GM to just screw over players who have good stuff anyway. And it's like, well, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
I think Amber is a very valuable game in terms of like the time it came out and what it did in terms of like pushing narrative and independent gaming. But at the same time, it's got a lot of early issues with that sort of game.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, for Mutants in the Now, I'd love to ask this question to the designers, especially that we have on the show. In your opinion, what is one of the biggest flaws of character creation for Mutants in the Now, and what is your favorite part?
I would say the favorite part is, I'm going to start with my favorite part, is just coming out the gate and discovering your animal and discovering your background and how that starts to shape the kind of the vision of this character and what they're going to become, and creates this kind of intriguing series of questions that you'll be answering throughout creation. I think to me, that kind of initial kind of start and then seeing how it wraps up at the end is kind of how you've gotten together at the end is the really kind of striking thing. People have said to me, like, I can't get my folks to play, only want to play 5th edition to play this. And I'm just like, have them create characters. Once they create characters, they will be, the chances are I've not seen anybody not get somewhat hooked who has not gone through character creation.
Yeah.
I honestly believe that about a lot of games. I think and I not to like toot our own horn or whatever, but I think that like, that's one of the things that I hope comes out of this podcast too, is people like, we just do the character creation. Like, we're not worried about how all the combat rules work or it's just like, I just want you to see like what's possible. Like, you get that little taste and like, unfortunately we are the people that like, we never get to do anything with it. Like we have, 7 years worth of characters that we've made. And, we just don't get to touch, but I think that's something really valuable for people is like, just see what it can do, just dip your toes in. You don't have to like, and I understand that there are barriers to entry, right? For switching systems. I know a lot of people are like, nobody wants to, switch systems. It's like, I understand there's a barrier of like, okay, these are new books I have to buy, the, mental load that it takes to learn new rules and to, like step outside that comfort zone. And like, sometimes your game is just like, it's your thing that you can count on and you don't want to change it up because you love this thing and, like all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, I do think that there's something to be said for just touch it a little bit. Just, just see. Yeah. Please just see. And it is like, you make a person and you're like, okay, well now I really like, I want to see what happens with this, like, this group of people that we made. Like, now what?
Well, with Mutants Now, I've called it almost like discovering a character as much as creating it. And I think that's part of the kind of secret sauce is that you are not necessarily dictating every part of the character, but animals are cool. And it's hard to go wrong with an anthropomorphic animal, as I'm sure many furries will tell you.
Yeah.
And so once you get down to that, you can easily create something that's cool and appealing, particularly with the specificity going on. Now, as far as my regrets as far as character creation goes is skill percentage determination is too fiddly. It just is. I was trying to create something that was more unified than Palladium is, and I definitely succeeded in that regard. And a lot of folks who play Palladium are like, oh, this is so much better. But at the same time, I feel like for the difference it makes, because the math on it is all generally curved towards the center. It's curved towards 50 to 60%. That for the amount of work put into it, you don't necessarily get quite the range I was hoping for. And it's a decent amount of work to do. It doesn't require, thankfully, as much flipping back and forth as Palladium games did.
Oh, yeah.
Where the skill percentages, where you select skills, where the skill packages are, and all in the are all separated out. So I try to make it at least simpler, but if I went back to it, that would be something I would examine. If I do a second edition, that's probably one of the things I'd examine the most closely.
Mhm.
Just
Absolutely.
like the curve of it, to like the statistical part of it, or
I would try and find a way to make it simpler to just put on the sheet, simpler to
okay.
come up with that percentage.
Mhm.
Right now, all you are
Yeah.
doing is looking up an attribute and a percentage associated with it and marking that down and then marking down the rate at which it improves. But I feel like there's got to be a simpler way to do it. Just because since attributes tend to range around those 14 to 18, a lot of those percentages end up very similar, around like the 50 to 70 range.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think like my highest is like 66 and my lowest is like 52 or something like that. But it's
and that's intentional. It's kind of a slightly revert. The way combat and non-combat is done is kind of reverse, where difference from what would be the mean or average and skills kind of accelerates and it decelerates for combat. But even with that acceleration, you still end up with what we have right now. So it's something I'd look at closely.
Yeah,
but it's not at the same time, it's not a huge issue.
Right.
It's not a it's just a slow point of character creation that isn't as enjoyable as picking out your whether or not you have claws versus having a tongue that looks like a worm.
Right.
So it's something I'd like to think about for the future. There are all sorts of as with any game, the game designer joke is when it's the time for the second edition once you finish the first edition.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
By the time you finish your first edition, you'll see all the things that you feel like are like, oh, I can do that better. But you have to accept that to a certain extent, you have made something that people are really enjoying.
Yeah.
And
at some point you do have to hit submit and let it alone.
That people aren't going to be as picky as you are as a designer. And so stuff that seems like horrific flaws are all right.
Yeah.
So,
well, and that goes back to that, like having so much contact with something, right? Is that like the more you look at it, the more you recognize those flaws in all those places where you're like, ooh, it's so close, but it's just not quite.
And you definitely
and sometimes the answer is that there is no right, like sometimes that's really what it comes down to is like there is no perfect.
Yeah. And certainly you see that, like, it makes me think of things like D&D 3.0 versus 3.5 or 5th Ed versus 2024, whatever they're calling it. Where there's a lot of really positive changes, but there are also changes that a lot of those changes you wouldn't have noticed otherwise unless they were brought up to you by somebody who's been shoving their head into the system for 3 years. Right. So, yeah,
that gets to that like quality of, like is this changing, all of these other things to like make this one change? And there's like how much do you change between a first and a second edition? Like how much has to change for it to be a new edition? Like that's an interesting question to me too.
And one of the things I wanted to do was have more of an a la carte fighting style system where your fighting style has different traits associated with it, and you go out and pick stuff like Legend of the Five Rings 5th edition. But it's a question of balancing that and the extra weight it puts on character creation. At the time, I just was like, I don't have time as a designer to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why you have kind of the level base, but you can switch between different styles. Thing that you have around, which works really well. And certainly you probably would not be able to tell the difference unless you play to like between that and the theoretical system I have in my head, unless you play into like 5th level, or whatever.
Yeah.
Which some folks are starting to get up there, but most groups, aren't playing dedicated campaigns. So,
and
that's just true of any game.
Right. Yeah.
So it's something to think about as time goes forward. I have one of the things I'm planning to work on after Mutants in the Archives is done is something I promised as part of Mutants in the Next that never got finished. That was called, which was going to be the system reference document kind of thing. Called Mutants in the Mix. And one of the things that has gotten me jazzed to start working on that again, because at the time I needed to focus on something that, would make money. And now I'm in a more stable situation, the more I can start thinking about that. And so Mutants in the Mix will allow me to do things like add like alternate rules or alternate systems that I'm thinking of to test out and things like that.
Nice.
And I think that's one thing that appeals to me because in making that actually finally happen. So
yeah,
because I've had people asking for ages, but it's more work than it sounds. So
yeah. All right. So, well, this is the time where we're going to get to that last little portion of character creation that we didn't do before. That's sort of like an optional portion that we talked about. This is our fan fiction section where we talk about what would happen if we played this game. What would our stories be, since we'll never actually do it?
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to this part. This is usually our favorite part of the whole podcast.
Yeah. Well, my biggest question is, how did we become a team? How did we meet and say, hey, let's work together because we can do some good?
Well, I think we have some connections between our contacts that could be explored.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, I have like a guy who's running around with tiny little robots trying to investigate wildlife sightings. And we already have somebody else who works in robotics as well who could be connected to him. As mentioned, we have two characters that have the same surname, which could just be coincidence, but rarely so in fiction.
Yes.
And certainly, I think with my character, he's kind of got the essential, conflict of a character like him is between his loyalty to his organization, but also finding his own identity and finding ways to explore the world that are outside of his bubble.
Yeah.
And so any sort of like run in with another mutant animal would definitely be intriguing for Rocky.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious because you have your little like zoo situation.
Yeah.
So like what prompts you to kind of, do we come into that or do you come out of that?
I think
because it feels like you've got like a pretty closed, safe.
It's a nice
situation,
safe, like secluded from society situation. I'm also not a citizen, right? So I'm just kind of existing in this zoo and trying to survive with my zoo pals, effectively.
Right. Yeah.
And
whereas I am a citizen, I do have a degree. I have.
Yeah.
But like, why am I talking to a lion?
Yeah, I wonder if this organization and the contacts that you two have that are potentially related, let's just say they are related because we can. I
think we should, for the sake of fiction. It's just that, like, I don't know, they're sisters or siblings or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like these the two white siblings probably had. Maybe both of you go in to see the mutant animals in the zoo and make contact effectively. Right?
Yeah. So, tell me about your organization that Rocky's a part of.
He's a part of a group that's at least publicly dedicated to animal preservation.
Okay.
Behind the scenes, they are actually taking animals to some extra-dimensional arc of some sort, or at least their genetic code.
Okay.
And one of the things that I didn't really talk too much about the implied setting is the means of the now, but one of the things that's implied is that for however bad we are about treating our environment, a lot of the nearby universes are actively worse. And so Earth is seen as kind of like a place that still has a lot of biodiversity and a lot of promise in that regard.
Okay.
So.
Well, I'm just wondering, because like I have this contact that's an intelligence agent too, which I assume is more governmental. But, there is the potential that this, they're also trying to figure out what does this group know? What is this, I'm a big fan of potential for backstabbing in stories. Like that's like my jam. So, I really like the complication of, like, let's find out what you know. And, just even if like being brought together is under some sort of false pretense, what happens from there is still interesting. So I feel like that is, there's potential for some of that of like, well, if they're an intelligence agent, they could be investigating this group or they could be undercover with this group. Right.
And
Mhm.
Was the intelligence agent the sibling of the group member, though?
in
Yeah.
theory, yeah, the doctor
Yeah.
who oversees
So
Rocky's.
like, we've got this doctor that's working for the organization. We got the doctor's sibling, who is kind of a spy of sorts, right?
Yeah. I mean, I do like, being undercover,
Mm-hmm.
like you've got it in already. Like, let's, if you happen to tell us what you know while you're hanging out with your sister.
And like secret sibling rivalry and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And then that would easily set up for the two of you to kind of see what's going on in this abandoned zoo.
Right.
Since like people don't go there anymore, and the wildlife has basically just been able to be on their own because it's gone and forgotten due to bureaucracy and all that sort of stuff, right?
Right. Right.
But like, why are the animals thriving there? And turns out, there's a
they've been
pride
left alone.
leader and there's a few mutants that are caretaking for the general animal population there.
Because they have martial arts movies on Laserdisc. So
Yeah, exactly.
that's why they're doing so great.
Mm-hmm.
I can only assume it's Laserdiscs.
Yeah, but all things considered, I'd also think that a group like that would have its own challenges in terms of like even just keeping their bellies full.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, because you're in
can,
an isolated area. Overhunting is an issue.
Mhm.
Like population is an issue.
Yeah.
You've got all kinds of unique problems there too, and so we do now have if like you bring us in, you have a doctor. Like I also know some first aid and things.
Yeah.
So like I think there's the potential that like we've gone in to find things out, but also the potential that like we've been partly brought in to like you're like we need help.
Yeah.
To maintain this.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
We could certainly be part of like have this kind of unsteady agreement where we're helping out with a lot of the everyday things that you're struggling with. But at the same time, it's a question of how much do you let our people in? How much do you let them either study you or, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder what sort
it all
of
feels like a very unsteady alliance happening in all of these places.
Yeah, I'm curious, like what sort of trouble came out of that as well, right? Like the prompt shows there's something that happens that I'm wondering if it's animals are disappearing mysteriously ever since your arrival or whatever, right?
And certainly you have groups in the setting like the Proteus Corporation or the Invasive Species Service that are interested in taking mutants for different purposes. Or in the case of the Invasive Species Service, we don't know what we're doing with them, but we're still kidnapping them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you could certainly have a common foe, particularly tricky if it's one like Proteus that has a lot of temporal power.
Ooh.
And how you keep something like this under wraps, is going to be a major challenge.
Definitely.
And so that means probably going after a lot of like their local representatives and finding ways to convince them to look the other way, whether that's through trickery or intimidation or just ruining their careers, who knows, so so that they're no longer considered respectable people within the organization, so on and so forth. And of course, there will probably be fights with mutant catching robots or whatnot at some point, or agents, of course. This is a game where, to a certain extent, the problems are solved with martial arts. At least some problems.
Oh, yeah.
Be solved with martial arts. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I can certainly see my character coming into a situation like that and being like, oh, this is like relatively safe. Like, and just for whatever reason that I would have come in there being like, oh, okay, like now we're going to protect this at all costs because like this is a place that is a sanctuary sort of situation of like, it is largely protected from the outside world. It is self-sufficient. It is, and like we're going to do what we need to do to make that happen.
Yeah.
And certainly with Rocky, you could get into the classic, like, where he fights for money and fame, but is just something where my fist can make a difference, kind of.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And this is what it means to fight for something meaningful, you know. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential in like the protect the zoo situation.
Yeah, I do like the thought of like some of these zoo animals and sentient mutant animals are getting kidnapped. And like, I like the thought of it seeming like it's the organization doing it, but it's, you know, some other group that's doing the kidnapping. And so it has that like mystery combined with like, do we double cross the organization we're working for sort of vibes to it? But then in the end, like, we're actually the good guys, question mark.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I really like that there's like several layers to unravel here. Like, I'm very interested in all of that kind of stuff too. So you have like we need to fight to protect this space. We need to figure out who we're even trying to fight to protect it from.
Yeah.
And you've got these disappearances happening. You've got, you know, this sort of like self-sufficiency and survival thing that needs to happen to protect ourselves on top of it. You know, what lengths are we willing to go to protect others when we have to protect ourselves too? I like all of those questions.
Because like then we're getting into tracking, stealth, investigation, brawling, like all of our strengths can be utilized trying to figure out this mystery.
And what happens when you put on a lion taming show, but this time the lion has the whip?
Yep. Bigger ticket turnouts, I presume.
That's,
the
lion tamer.
Dog bites man and all that. Man bites dog, I should say. But no, it's and you could definitely have kind of the question of how much are we going to rely on this seeming benevolent organization? How much control do we let them have to help us out with them versus us doing this on our own? Kind of question.
Yeah. I think there's like a lot to uncover and a lot to unpack and lots of possible twists and things to keep things interesting. I feel like a lot of leeway for us to kind of determine where that story goes too.
Absolutely.
Oh, I really like it.
I just want to leap around as a 9'2" like lion character, just tearing apart robots.
We've got two big characters.
Yeah.
With a lot of physical power and one with a lot of spatial power. Let's say spatial power, ability to be in different places.
Absolutely. I love this group. A lot of fun possibilities. It's really cool.
I think one thing that comes up more often than I expect is people gravitating towards rural setups. And that makes sense in retrospect. But people like going, okay, we have our own little farm, or we have our own little junkyard or whatever. Yeah. I think the current campaign I'm running is like the first that's gravitated towards doing stuff in Los Angeles. So,
fun.
Yeah. I like anything that has like base building vibes to me. So like I gravitate toward the zoo. I still imagine it being like in a big city, but I do like, you know, sort of like the base building kind of
like on the outskirts of like a failed like sprawl of a big city, right?
Yeah.
So like we're right outside, like we can get to the city no problem, but like nobody comes here.
Right.
It's just kind of in an abandoned area. Maybe there was like an industrial district that tried to come up in this spot, but it was more successful elsewhere. So it's like you got abandoned industrial buildings and warehouses too.
Yeah.
One of the things I'd like to do on my short list for like new stuff for mutants across the world for me to do on my own, as opposed to hand over to other people, right, would be to do like a community or organization building system.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
God, I really love like how like to some extent how the Fragged Empire games did it too. So I'd probably be looking at that, but also looking at the old Palladium things and going, how can I make things feel a little like the old Palladium, like spy organizations and what have you. Those were kind of weird, but you know, they still have a lot of
fun
appeal.
Potential.
Yeah,
absolutely.
a lot of appeal as to like where you're putting your points. Though with me focusing on, I'd probably be focusing on like contacts and NPCs that are backbones for capabilities the community has. So
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, speaking
yeah.
of building up communities and advancing your characters and the story, I would love to get into some advancement discussion and take things up a level.
Take it up a level. Take it up a level.
So let's start with like the mechanical part of it. How do characters advance, and then what happens mechanically as you quote unquote level up?
Is a level-based system. You have 10 levels in total. Essentially, you're usually gaining XP awards from differently, I suppose, whether or not you're doing episodic or serialized stories. Doing critical failures gives you a tiny bit of XP, since that's something you choose. And you also have what are called subplots, where players can propose a given plot to the game master. And when those get resolved, those also give experience.
Oh, cool.
The leveling process is generally when you're playing, you mark skills that you use. And when you do the level up, you initially can increase like 3 of those skills that you've used. And then you choose another 3 skills that you can either gain or advance, forward. And you get to advance to attributes by +1.
Oh, cool.
When you do so, you mark them. And basically, it's a way to just keep you from just doing the same attributes over and over.
Sure.
So, the next level, you have to select a different 2 attributes. Then after that, you can go back to the original 2 attributes you want to improve, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And even another level, you get what's called a milestone. And that's basically a big selection of you could add even more skills. You could, if you gain the package ability of a skill package, since you don't normally aren't getting skill packages after creation, you could do more attribute bonuses. You could really improve specialize in a particular skill. You could add extra skills to a contact. You can get additional will, the resource that's used to boost. You can gain additional gimmicks, and you can also gain small amounts of goopy to use for mutations. Have a later mutation. You also, whenever you level up your martial art, which usually every even number level gives you an attribute bonus of some sort. At every odd level, it gives you a new technique that you can use. And that is most of it. The martial arts are kind of skewed, so you get basically what will be your capstone at level 9. So you have a bit of a chance to play with it before level 10.
Yeah. I appreciate that.
Other than that, a key point, you can switch your martial arts style at any level. When you do so, you basically only get the what's called the base ability and a few maneuvers, as opposed to the core ability, which is the one you get at create, core ability and core bonus, which are what you get at creation and apply only to the very first martial art you picked up. And they usually give something really distinctive and strong. And this, as a designer, it's a way to have those really strong abilities without worrying about people stacking them up quite so easily. So, and that's most of it. There's also some discussion of what happens if you lose a contact and how you recover them, whether or not how you deal with increasing amounts of money if the players are getting that, and so on and so forth. But those are much more soft types of advancement.
Yeah. It's interesting because it's all right there in 2 pages of all the fun little things you get through advancing within the system itself. And there's a lot of neat little options to like you said, there's a lot of that specificity that's kind of marked throughout this entire game that gets you into more cool, interesting things for your character.
And of course, you just get a small amount of SHT and HP each time.
Of course.
Not a ton, but it's intended to be more gradual than a lot of older Dungeon Fantasy games. But and my choice to make it to level 10 was pretty much just when I was looking at old Palladium games, it's nobody is ever getting past level 10.
No.
So, I remember calculating how much you would have to play and it is into like a decade of play. You know,
Yeah. The
that
closest I
kind of level
got
is
was
one
level
usually.
8, I think. It was ridiculous. And that was
I think
after
the
like
closest-
multiple years.
I think the closest Kevin Bieta got was like level 8 or 9 in his
Wow.
longest running campaign. So then you get into like the books that have like levels 16 through 25, and it's like, why does this
Why does this exist? Yeah.
this helps no one.
Uh-huh.
Wishful thinking.
Yep. The prestige
if
classes.
you have a regular game for 60 years, more luck to you. But
Mm-hmm.
That's the ultimate power fantasy right there.
Mm-hmm.
Is, a level 12 character.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so
Absolutely.
it's just very kind of like gradual stuff for your skills in martial arts, and then getting every 2 levels you get to make a stronger choice as to where you're developing your character. So
That's awesome.
And you mentioned episodic, and what was the other one?
episodic and serial. I don't know if serial was the word I used, but just different rewarding for if you're doing like an ongoing plot that takes it's 6 sessions.
Mhm.
Okay.
Very cool.
And little things like whenever you fail a skill, you mark it, and that gives you a tiny little XP bonus. I don't know how much that would determine, but it's fun.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'm always
It
reminded.
feels nice to check a box.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
remember having a character in D&D 3.5 that got 10% more experience due to a weird ruling. And people were, the folks in my group were like, what? But the net effect is like maybe half the time I level up a session before you guys do.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Overall
almost
doesn't
not,
do that much, but
not
Mhm.
worth it.
numbers go up. So
number go up. So it's exciting.
hooray.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, at least it's not like the wizard versus the fighter leveling up curves or whatever.
Yeah.
Being completely skewed towards the fighty classes go faster and the more heady classes are just take forever to
Stuck.
get to the next level.
Yeah.
Yeah. Palladium has its all its different charts, and they're generally supposed to be a measure of how powerful that class is, but it's very kind of dodgy as to whether or not they nailed it. And
Mhm.
sometimes you get weird stuff like this grunt soldier levels faster at the midpoint of levels, but slower at the start and slower at the end than the officer does. I don't know what's going on here. I don't know what the intent is. I don't know if there was an intent or if it was a math error, but just weird.
Yeah.
I could go on
Absolutely.
and on.
Uh,
I'm trying not to make this try and resist my instincts to just dunk on old Palladium games, but
That's half of this podcast.
It's hard to resist.
fine.
Absolutely.
oh, such a
That's
soft
their
target.
fault. That's
Oh,
Mhm.
made a better game, then we won't dunk on it.
Mhm. Awesome. Well, I think, is there anything else about Mutants in the Now that you want to say before we close out the series?
we have a great Discord server, and you can find the address at the very bottom of the JK Games page. I should make it more distinctive. It's also in the Mutants in the Archives campaign as well. But we've gotten a community I'm very proud of, and I'm very glad they have. I've been very good at kind of policing themselves and being, creating a positive community about it.
Good.
I certainly had some worries when I opened up a Discord,
Yeah.
but I've had almost nothing to worry about. I just had a lot of really cool folks.
Nice. That's always really refreshing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I hear stories of other creators, nightmare stories from other creators. And I'm just kind of like, oh, I'm so blessed. So
Yeah.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, Julian, thank you so much for joining us to talk about Mutants in the Now. This was fascinating. I loved learning about this game.
thank
Yeah,
you
I'm
so
glad we
much.
finally got to cover it.
And
This
I
was
was
good.
honored to have you folks spend time with me and let me show off
Absolutely.
my last 4 years of work or so. So
Yeah. Can you go ahead and remind everyone where they can find you online and the sorts of things you got going on?
Yeah, I'm Julian Kay or Arbco on Blue Sky and Mastodon. Also, you can find my website at j-k.games. Like I said, Mutants in the Archives Pet Shop Blues, our newest expansion, is currently getting wrapped up, and late backing is still available on it for Kickstarter, so you can just look up Mutants in the Archives there. Sorry, Mutants from the Archives, I should be precise. And yeah, I've been, I'll definitely have more stuff to talk about in the future as it gets announced, but right now I'm really excited to get this weird little book of dogs and cats and other things like aquarium fish out to folks, along with some very topical villains, and look forward to the next stuff I have to announce, because it's going to get pretty wild.
Absolutely.
No pun intended. So,
thank you for sitting down with us, and thank you to everyone for tuning in.
Call to action.
Yeah, like that.
Well, I am really thrilled how this series panned out. Julian was a fantastic guest. This discussion episode has some really interesting insight, especially into character sheets and whatnot. So I really hope everybody got something cool out of this episode. I really enjoyed the discussion that we have here. And the designer discussions have been just top notch, I think, the last few series. So really happy how everything panned out. Really cool stuff coming out from Julian. I'm really excited for that next Mutants in the Archives stuff, for the pet shop stuff. I think that'll be really cool to have all those extra options, and wild that every species has unique stuff attuned to them. So we do have another series coming up next week, so I'll tell you a bit about that at the end of the calls to action here. But before we let you go for the day, here's what we have for today's calls to action. First up, if you missed our live stream last week, Wednesday, we still have the video on demand available for everyone on the One Shot Twitch channel until it expires later in August. If you end up missing that replay, you will be able to access both the video replay or just the audio of the session on our Patreon at the $5 and up level. This version will be slightly more produced and feel more like a podcast episode, but will still have that streaming feel to it, especially if you watch the video itself. As for the next live stream, we plan on streaming every third Wednesday of every month. So our next planned live stream will be on August 20th at 6:30 p.m. Central US time, and will go until about 8 o'clock that night for about 1.5 hours of game design for our Magical Girl Meets Necromancer TTRPG, Undying Bonds. We're both really excited to get back into this, so it would be great to see you there live if you're able. If you want to help us out in a more direct way, we would love it if you checked out the C3 Patreon at patreon.com/charactercreationcast. We are so close to our $160 a month goal, which will let us hire someone to do monthly webpage updates to our site at charactercreationcast.com. We would like to add information to pages dedicated to all of the games that we are covering on the show going forward, including links to character sheets, links to the episodes, and more. In addition to that, as a thank you, we are going to be creating a unique enamel pin for all of our campaign level backers. If able, we'll get some extras for folks that join up at that level in the future. And we are only one campaign level patron away from that goal. So it's not very far away at all, and you can help us get there. If we get to $200 a month, not only will that unlock yearly subscriptions for our supporters at a discount, it will also mean that we can afford to pay this person a bit more every month to update the backlog of games on our site. This level is only 5 campaign level backers away, and it would be remarkable to get there before the end of the summer. Joining at the campaign level, this is what it means. You get new stickers for every month that you are a patron, including one of every sticker that we've produced so far that we still have on hand. It's like 25-ish stickers at this point, all for that initial $10 a month. You also get a 3d6 set of C3 branded dice that are really great quality from ChessX. You also get a personalized thank you card from the both of us, handcrafted by Amelia, as well as many other perks. This is all for $10 a month, and it will go a long way toward helping provide a one-stop shop for any of the games that we cover on the show. We also have tiers at the $5 level, which does net you the dice and our bonus episodes, and $1 levels that get you various perks as well. So you can head on over to patreon.com/charactercreationcast to get all the info. In addition to all of that, we do like to thank our current patrons every episode. Your support truly helps out a great deal. So let's go ahead and do that right now. Lieutenant DJG, aka Tigranosaurus, and Eric Bonds, thank you all for your continued support. Daryl Holiday II, Shadim Cabal, and the Shyest Barbarian, thanks. Benjamin Sweeney, Rob Fletcher, and Kevin Brown, you all rock. Thank you. Thanks to Tentacle Duck, John Adamus, and A3 Sketchpad. Really glad to have you here with us. Thank you to Cole McCallum, Carlos Salazar, and Eric S. Your support brings us so much joy. Ian Pontmeyer, Liam G, and Brian Colm, so happy to have you here with us too. Thank you. Garden GM, Tanglefoot, and Blue Kryptonite, thank you all so much. Danny, Nicole Trainer, and Leah Murray, thank you for your continued support as well. Thank you to Kenning, Brian, Kurtz, and Mark E. Fair. We couldn't do this without you. Thank you to Drew Owen, Oz, and James McKinley. Thank you for supporting our dreams. Sean Metcalf, Robert, and Kevin Bates. You shouldn't have, but we're really glad you did. And finally, Deadly Edley and Allison Cole. Thank you both so much for supporting. And thank you to all of our future patrons. If you want to join this phenomenal group of individuals, please head on over to patreon.com/charactercreationcast and help us out. And with more assistance, we'll be able to make those website upgrades to make exploring your favorite games that much easier. And if you want to join in the discussion with our hosts, some of our guests, and a bunch of fans, head on over to our Discord at discord.charactercreationcast.com. In addition to all of that, if you want to help us out in another way that doesn't require any money, you can leave a rating and review for our show on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, or Podcast Addict, and we will read every new 5-star review as we get them and as we both have a chance to record together. That's all we have for today's episode. Join us here next week where we begin a brand new series where previous guest of the show, Allison K. Cole, introduces us to her online LARP RPG, Strangers on the Net. It's a really great series with some fantastic discussion and some even more fantastic characters, so we hope to see you there. Until then, take care everyone, stay safe, drink some water, and keep making those amazing people. We'll see you next time. Character Creation Cast is a production of the One Shot Podcast Network and can be found online at www.charactercreationcast.com. Head to the website to get more information on our hosts, this show, and even our press kit. Character Creation Cast can also be found on Twitter and Blue Sky at CreationCast, or on our Discord server at discord.charactercreationcast.com. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Bolter, and I can be found on Twitter and Blue Sky at Lord Neptune or online at lordneptune.com. Our other host, Amelia Antrim, can be found on Twitter and Blue Sky at Ginger Reckoning. Music for this episode is used with a Creative Commons license or with permission from the podcast they originated from. Further information can be found within the show notes. Our main theme music is Hero Remix by Steve Combs and is used with a Creative Commons license. This podcast is owned by us under Creative Commons. This episode was edited by Ryan Bolter. Further information for the game systems used and today's guests can also be found in the show notes. If you'd like to support our show, find us on Patreon. Get access to bonus episodes, exclusive merch, and much more at patreon.com/charactercreationcast. Thanks for joining us. And remember, we find that the best part of any role-playing game is character creation. So go out there and create some amazing people. We'll see you next time.